Good morning. This is your faithful horror host, Edward October. Tune in to OctoberPod home video on YouTube, where each month we tell a new spooky story. What is OctoberPod, you ask? OctoberPod is the creepy urban legend told to you by a friend over a bottle of wine. OctoberPod is the long, restless night you spent in the basement, waiting for the storm to pass. Still curious? Subscribe to OctoberPod home video on YouTube, or follow me on Twitter at OctoberPodVHS. OctoberPod, the place where nightmare and nostalgia coexist.
Hey there, this is John from Pint Comics.
And I'm Lloyd, also from Pint Comics.
And I'm the other John, and you get it by now. As you may know, we sometimes use language on this show that can be described as...
Filthy.
Okay.
Reprehensible?
Crude?
Sure.
Nasty.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, guys. We all know that it's just plain out gutter talk.
You've been warned. Listen in.
Welcome to the Pint Movie Invitational Series.
Starfleet reports our last 6 crew members are ready to beam up, but one of them is refusing to step into the transporter.
Oh, I'll see to it that he beams up.
Do you hear the sound of the lawnmower coming for you? That's the Pint Comics lawnmower. Pint Comics, Lawnmower Man. Pint Comics brought to you by COVID-19. COVID-19. Fuck your podcast, Pint Comics. Yeah, so it is a Pint Movie Invitational episode. I am Ganache. We got the Manster. Manster, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing
today? I got
today?
tested for the COVID antibodies and turned out negative.
No, but I heard that the doctor had written in a note box on the bottom that you absolutely passed for hard body.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sir John with us. Sir John is currently having his lawn mowed, or someone's lawn mowed in the background.
Not mine.
If you hear that, you can go along with this episode and pretend it's the sound of a Klingon battle cruiser heating up. There it is. Hear that? There it is right in the background. Maltz. Da-cha. And our special guest tonight on the Pint Movie Invitational is our friend from the Charlton Movie. Charlton Movie and a brand new, really rad podcast that I'm digging a lot. Pizza and Pop Culture, correct? Is that the right name, Keith?
That is the right name, yeah.
I thought it was. Keith Larsen. Keith, what is going on, man?
Well, a whole lot of nothing, and yeah, I'm ready to climb out of my own skin at this point. I can't take much more of this home stuff.
Yeah,
it's weird because when it first started, I was getting a lot of stuff accomplished, and I'd look up and go, "Oh, it's only lunchtime," and I got a whole. Now I'd hardly do anything, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it's dinner time."
Yeah,
it's getting to the point. I need to go back to work.
Yeah, and I got to ask too, Keith, because do you live alone or you have a roommate? What's your situation?
I generally live alone. I had my nephew here with me for about 8 months.
Yeah.
He was transitioning between jobs, and it took longer than he thought. So he just moved out a few weeks ago. So I'm back to being alone.
So, real question. I know John has a roommate. I know that they're not necessarily like, Balky and cousin Larry like hanging out all the time. Like, what's it like living alone during this time? I mean, are you like, honestly, are you like just like fuck? Like, I just want to like talk to. Like, at least I've got my wife here. I could talk to somebody if I want to. Like, how are you holding up? Seriously, I've thought of that. I've thought about, like, what is it like for people that are flat out alone at home right now?
It's not that bad. My neighbors are outside all the time, so I go out and talk to them, go visit my parents, that kind of thing. So, and then you're on the phone or you're doing these Zoom chats and stuff. So sometimes I just was on the phone with my buddy Pete for 2 hours and it just flew by. So,
okay. Yeah. So I knew, obviously you have people in your life. I just didn't know what it's like 24 hours in the house alone some days,
I just tend to sleep a little longer because nobody's waking me up.
There you go. Hey, I wouldn't mind that. Mind that. I've been surfing a couch for about a month and a half right now for COVID reasons and my wife's health reasons. Her doctor told her that she wants me not to sleep with her. So I go through these periods where I have 3 or 4 nights of really great sleep because it's a comfortable couch. And then I have 2 or 3 nights in a row of fuck this couch. I can't sleep tonight. And I'm not an insomnia person. I know John has kind of talked about having that issue sometimes. And I give credit to anybody that can deal with that because it's maddening. It's maddening wanting to sleep and that's something I've never really had happen in my life.
Yeah, it sucks laying there hour after hour after hour.
Yeah.
After hour.
And then the more you want to fall asleep, the more frustrated you get, and then the more awake you become.
Yes.
That's when I watched season 16,000 of NCIS.
Yeah. It happened to me a few weeks ago. So on a Friday night into a Saturday morning, I had to work the next day. I couldn't sleep all night. An hour here, half an hour there, up. Finally, at 4 a.m, I was like, fuck this. I grabbed my iPad, I put the headphones in, and I watched a movie on Netflix. And as I get 3/4 of the way through the movie, I start to fall asleep an hour before I have to be at work. And I'm like, this whole world is just against Baby Ganache right now. So, Keith, you came on. We asked you to bring us a movie. And we're going to talk more about pizza and pop culture and the Charlton movie after. But we asked you to bring us a movie, as we do on these things all the time. You brought us a movie. I want you to tell everybody out there what the movie is and why you brought it to us, and point out the fact that you're wearing the shirt with the logo on it right now.
Well, when you hit me with that question, I was like, oh man, it's kind of weird. I thought of the days when I used to walk into a Blockbuster Video and walk around for hours looking at all the different movies and then not making a choice and walking out because it got too late. I had the same kind of problem. I'm looking at all my Blu-rays and stuff and I'm like, oh, what do I pick? And then it just hit me somehow. Somebody was talking about, or I heard something about Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which just turned 40 years old on December 7th of 2019. So we're still in that 40th year. Over the years, as I've gotten older, it's climbed my Star Trek film ranking chart all the way to number 2. So I thought, you know what? That might be a fun discussion. Why is it so underrated? Why do I think it's so great? And maybe some other people share the opinion. And it's also a way to celebrate the 40th anniversary.
That's right. December 7th, 1979. We'll go over some factoids about the movie before we get into everything else. This was budgeted at $45 million. And I honestly, so I've seen this movie, throughout my life several times. I never knew that this movie was a hit. This movie made $139 million worldwide.
It's because they didn't look at it as a hit, but it made a lot of money. There's a lot of things about it why it didn't make money. This is kind of the Superman Returns situation where they had excess budgeting and excess earlier spent money that needed to be paid for by the profits. So while it wasn't seen as a runaway hit, it did make money.
Yeah.
Right. It was actually budgeted for 15 out of the gate, and they hired a company called Robert Abel and Associates to do the visual effects. And after a year of working on these effects and getting nowhere, because these guys were an ad agency that did a lot of high-end commercials, this thing was way out of their... They didn't stay in their lane, as the kids say. And now they lost a year on production, and they had nothing. So they had to scramble, allocate no more money, and they had to go and wine and dine Douglas Trumbull, who then had to hire John Dykstra to help him to get all this stuff done in time, because that December 7th was firm. They were not going to move that.
Yeah.
Now, I also heard that much of that $45 million was spent on the Phase 2 TV series.
Yes, that
was going to be developed. Yeah. So it was really more like $26 million.
Right, because they had already sunk money into that Phase 2 that turned into the movie.
Right.
John, why don't you explain to everybody out there the bumper sticker version of what Phase 2 was supposed to have been.
Paramount and Roddenberry wanted to create the next series of Star Trek because it made such a huge amount of money for them in syndication, and it built such a huge following. Roddenberry tried to get Paramount to go forward with another television series, and they were all for it. Although he did want to make a film before this. Paramount wasn't ready to do a film, but they were ready to do a TV series. And what a lot of people probably don't know is Paramount was also looking into creating a fourth network at the time, of which Star Trek Phase 2 was going to be their centerpiece. And, well, none of that absolutely happened. So.
Funnily enough, it did happen 20 plus years later.
Yeah,
UPN got created, and then Voyager became one of the first shows on UPN. Phase 2 is the idea behind this second 5-year mission. It is going to include the entire original cast, except for one notable person that told Roddenberry to go fuck himself, which was Leonard Nimoy, who at that point was done with Spock and was, I think, right, he was mad at them, money issues and
royalties that he didn't get paid.
Exactly, royalties that he was owed.
So they have
money.
Yeah, they have everybody on board. So they're going to replace Spock with an actor. I think it was David Gothru, G-A-U. It's Gothru, I think it is. Was going to play a full-blooded Vulcan. I almost said full-blooded fucking full-blooded Vulcan science officer named Zahn. And you can go on YouTube and there are costume tests. Persis Kambata was going to play Lieutenant Ilea on the show, and they were looking to bring in the Deckard character as well. But Stephen Collins, and when we get into Stephen Collins, we'll talk about how he's a little problematic to talk about nowadays. He wasn't part of that religious. Yet. Yeah, he's got some stuff going on. Eventually, I think it was Michael Eisner was running Paramount at the time, and he read the initial one of the initial script treatments, which was called In Thy Image. And he right then and there said, this is a Star Trek motion picture, right?
Yeah, Star Trek 5.
Yeah. So, well, I got an idea about 4 too in all this. So he says we're going to make the movie, and they decide eventually the Paramount network doesn't happen, and Phase 2 gets broken down. Although the Phase 2 money went towards the movie, some of the sets were already created and were used in the movie. So it kind of is like a happy accident in a way that this movie came together. So
I think part of the impetus too was the success of Star Wars and then Close Encounters.
Yeah.
So it showed that sci-fi feature films were viable property. Again, they were dominating the box office.
Yeah,
definitely.
And they had this IP sitting here. Why put it on television? Let's do this.
Yeah, and a lot of it because of the network wasn't coming together the way they wanted it to. So it's a hell of a lot easier to make a feature film than create a whole new network.
Yeah. I think I read that there was 13 finished scripts for Phase 2.
Yeah, of which many of them were reproduced by, what's his name? The guy that runs the museum up in Ticonderoga. They did them online, basically.
Fan films, yeah.
Yeah, they're fanfics, and they're utilizing the scripts. And unfortunately, as much as fans may like them, these are scripts done. They're films directly from these scripts, and these scripts were not edited in any way. So, I mean, when you see a finished script from the original series, you'll see lots of scenes that were taken out. Either they may have been filmed or otherwise, but the finished piece is not what you see in the written script.
It's almost like it's a first draft or a second draft.
Well, it's a working script, and stuff gets tossed away as they edit the thing. Now, these amateur hour pieces that they've done, you can see why you don't film every piece that's been written into a script.
Right.
You should go see them. They're interesting.
I know at least one of the scripts.
James Cawley. That's the guy.
James Cawley. Yeah. One of the scripts was reworked into a Next Generation episode. I don't remember the title of it. Only one I wrote down of title-wise was In Thy Image, which is what eventually became the motion picture. So this movie, this movie, that's what a lot of people. I wanted to actually rewatch that episode before this, and I didn't get a chance to. But a lot of people have kind of said that the Changeling episode of Star Trek, the original series, is kind of like this is kind of like, maybe just a big budget version of?
It's
Well,
pretty
the
close.
simple premise that the machine's looking for its creator. That's it.
That's really about it. Okay.
Well, and the probe. You know, you got the probe. It doesn't look like a hot chick in a miniskirt, but
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up quickly about. So the story of this movie, without getting too far ahead, is that there's a machine entity heading towards Earth. It's going to destroy Earth, and they figure out that it's just looking for its creator. Star Trek 4 is the same fucking thing. Star Trek 4 is a probe of unknown origin looking for the whales. And it's going to destroy Earth if it doesn't find the whales. It's like 3 movies later. Did nobody notice that you're just kind of doing this again?
Say there's only 7 plot devices in the world, right?
Yeah. All right. So this movie was directed by Robert Wise, who has been around at that point. He was a classic film director.
he was so happy to do this movie.
West Side Story, The Sound of Music. So next time you see Star Trek the Motion Picture, realize it's the same guy who made The Sound of Music, and The Hindenburg. This is weird how it was written. The actual story was written by Alan Dean Foster, who is known for being a novelist who does a lot of stuff that's he does his own novels, but he does a lot of movie novelizations, stuff like that. He did Star Wars Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which is a famous Star Wars EU story. He did a book called Ice Rigger and Blood Hype. Those are like originals. They brought a guy named Harold Livingston in to write the screenplay, and he was a TV veteran like Gene Roddenberry. He did Mission Impossible, Mannix, and Banachek. He did stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, here's a crazy piece of trivia. So Alan Dean Foster, who's known for novels, the only movie that he pretty much has credit in is this in terms of story. Do you guys know who wrote the novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture?
That would be Gene Roddenberry himself. That's a horrible imitation of him, but Gene Roddenberry.
Now, Keith,
he kind of porned it out.
Now, Keith, here's a bonus question for you.
Yeah.
All right. So you know that's Gene Roddenberry wrote the novelization of this. Do you know what else is very specific or special about him writing that novel?
Well, he's got some bizarre scenes in there. I can't think of anything else.
It is the only Star Trek novel Gene Roddenberry ever wrote.
Oh, okay.
So he has no other, like the guy who created the thing, you'd think he'd maybe have like 4 or 5 of these EU or whatever they call it. What do you call it in Star Trek?
Nothing.
Nothing? Canon. Okay. The only novel written by Roddenberry was the Star Trek the Motion Picture novel. That's a little bit of the background there. We'll get into the story in a second, but first Lloyd is going to take us through the cast of STTMP TNG.
Who played V'ger?
Part 2. Hey, before I do that, I want to know, on a ranking from, say, 1 to 5, each of you, how deep are you in the Star Trek universe? For instance, for me, I watched Star Trek sometimes as a young man. I didn't really get into it till The Next Generation. So I haven't even seen the whole original series, probably
shame on
10 episodes maybe. So I'd put myself at like maybe a 2. Where are you guys?
Start with Keith.
Oh, me.
Keith, yeah, go ahead.
4.5.
All right.
Yeah, I've been a fan since I was a little kid. The Wrath of Khan really got me to the next level of Star Trek. I got really absorbed from that point forward.
Absorbed.
I'm not a fan of the 2 new shows. I can't.
Shame your mouth. Shut your whore mouth, Keith. Discovery is an awesome show.
They're bad. They're not.
Oh, I gotta. Where's that button to knock shitty chicken off of this?
I can't. I tried.
Have you watched Picard yet?
Oh, I gave up on that after 4 episodes.
Ganache, have you watched it?
5 episodes, and Picard is my go-to show if I want to fall asleep. You know what?
Yeah.
All that talk before, I should try to watch Picard at night.
There you go. Because that show was awful.
As good as I think Discovery is, Picard is the opposite. I don't think it's terrible.
No,
I think I think it's uninvolving, which to me is
you didn't get to the end.
Bad.
You haven't got to the end.
No.
You get to
I know what happened.
There was
Keith, I watched all 10 episodes. I was hoping it would go somewhere, and man, it fails so badly at the end. It's like what was that? It's like standing in front of the desk where Mr. Burns is hitting the button and waiting for the trap door to drop out from under. It's so bad. And
I've seen all 10, and I can hardly remember what happened.
Well, that's not unusual for you, though.
I watched the Red Letter Media 90-minute review this week of it, and it's a mess.
All right, Sir John, where are you? Where's your rank?
What'd you top it off at? 5?
5.
Yeah.
4.5.
Give me a 15 because
Okay. All right.
By the age of 10, I knew every single original series episode by title, possibly in order.
Yep.
That's how nerdy I was.
Manuals. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I was nuts.
So you read all the books and all that.
I didn't read all the books. A lot of the books are crap. They really are. You have to be very picky with which books you read and which characters you really want to focus on. I fell out during Next Gen. I was not a fan of Next Gen at all. By season 3, when they replaced the Doctor with what the hell was her name? Diana Muldaur.
Yeah, Diana Muldaur.
Who appeared in a few episodes of the original series. 2, I think. 1, it was a bad casting choice, but that show by season 3 was so bad, it was just difficult for me to watch it. It just did not feel like anything other than repastiched episodes of the original series and really tight spandex.
Okay, I like Next Gen myself.
Yeah,
but those first 2 seasons are rough, man.
They are very rough. I did go back and watch from then on, but by season 3, I'd stopped watching it. I don't even think I finished the entire season.
Wow.
It was awful. I will say though, towards the end of that show, it got really good. There are single episodes that I put up there as some of the best Star Trek ever. So
I was just gonna say, are you talking about the one with Picard and his flute? Everybody talks about that one.
No, that's not one of my favorites.
Okay,
it might be.
Prefer the original series or the movies?
Do I prefer the original series?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You can't beat what they were able to do with such a minimal budget. In the time that they had. So the movies are great, but it's except for 2, 3, and 4 tell one good solid story. The rest of them are kind of out there.
All right, Mr. Ganache.
Definitely not a 15 and not a 4.5. I think I'm fairly solid. I love original series. I'm also not really a fan of Next Gen. I never finished it, but I did. I know John hates it, so I'm going to get past it real quick. I like Deep Space Nine quite a bit. I thought that was a really good show. Voyager
likes it.
Voyager just had an erection. So.
Voyager, I thought was hot garbage. I tried that a few times, and Enterprise was also. So I would say I'm more like a 2.75. I'm like that Star Trek fan that knows quite a bit about Star Trek, but is not going to compete in a trivia contest. And if I was in a room with Keith and John, I would stand in the back and let them answer all the questions. And once in a while I would go, the Reliance call numbers, NCC 1864, because I know certain things, I used to know, I don't remember it. I used to know the code that Spock puts into the Enterprise's console to take over the Reliance console, but I can't remember it anymore. I used to know that.
The prefix code?
The prefix code, yeah.
6309, right?
It's something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
What is it? Our shields, they're going down. We'll raise them. Rathacon. Anyways, we're here to talk about the motion picture and the cast. Lloyd, go through the cast.
So, obviously, you've got William Shatner as James T. Kirk, the former captain of the Enterprise and current admiral at Starfleet, or an admiral, whatever.
I think it's an admiral. Yeah.
Then you got Leonard Nimoy as Spock, the half Vulcan, half human science officer.
Lured back to the role by Mr. Wise.
Oh, was it Robert Wise that got him back?
Robert Wise got him back apparently because his kids or grandkids heard that Spock wasn't going to be in the movie and flipped out. Said, it's not Star Trek without Spock.
Right. So they sent
that's a story. Who knows if it's true?
To give him a check. Yep.
Hey, Katzenberger.
He also got final script approval.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did he really? Wow.
Yeah. because he wasn't really satisfied with the script. He made some changes.
Well, who the hell was satisfied with it? The damn thing was still being changed at the very last minute.
That's a common theme on all this cast. Nobody's really happy with it.
Yeah.
So then you got DeForest Kelley as McCoy Bones, the chief medical officer.
Can I ask you a quick question about Bones in this movie? So they mentioned that he's out of Starfleet for several years. And did anybody else get the feeling that then in the plot device, they draft him back into the service, like through an emergency reserve? But did anybody else get the feeling that they beamed him up from Studio 54? What the fuck? What the fuck is he wearing?
Yeah, he's all discoed out, man.
It's like, damn it, Jim, I was about to get some puss.
Medallion.
He's got a fucking giant clock. He's like, Flav.
Yeah, because Uhura's hair was really 23rd century.
Yeah,
I mean,
those
1979.
Even the art direction, everything looks like it's out of the J.C. Penney fall catalog. It's
all beige
and brown. It's very symptomatic of the era. You know?
Yeah.
Again, he was not happy with the characterization of them and lobbied for some changes, which basically went ignored. Then you got James Doohan as Montgomery Scott, the chief engineer. And what I didn't know is he was involved in creating the Klingon language, some general sounds and words and stuff like that.
Yeah, I learned that reading about this too, that he created a lot of it. They filmed the Klingon scenes and then they had him come in and make like these guttural sounds, and then they translated it into whatever they needed it to be. I don't know why. It's weird because it didn't really say why. Was he just there that day? And they're like, we need some, or does he have like a degree in linguistics? Or was he just literally the first one back from lunch? And they're like, Jimmy, you want to do some Klingon? He's like, fuck it.
He did a lot of voiceover work, and on the original series itself, he also did many of the disembodied voices that you'd hear at various points. So,
same with the animated series. He did a lot of the background characters and things like that.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I think he did the voices of Chekhov and Sulu because they didn't hire the entire cast for the animated series. They just hired most of them.
Yeah, Walter Koenig wasn't back.
Right.
Really?
There was no Chekhov. That's why they have Mr. Eris.
That weird alien.
Yeah.
All right. So you have Walter Koenig as Chekhov, the weapons officer.
Can I bring up something real quick about Chekhov?
Yeah.
I've always noticed this, and I just solidified it again. In the Star Trek movies, when you needed to grievously injure one of the crew, you just did it to Chekhov. So Chekhov gets his hand burnt in this one when the warp wormhole blows up his console. In part 2, he gets the fucking mind control slug in his head, and in part 4, he falls off of the aircraft carrier and ends up in the hospital. Like, you would have thought at some point they'd be like, just do it to Sulu. Like, he's just like, could you guys do this to like maybe Nichelle or Jimmy? They're like, no, fuck you, Walter. You're going to get hurt again. I'm surprised in part 6 or 5, he didn't end up with like gonorrhea.
But he's the youngest. You could easily beat up on the youngest guy. So.
Yeah.
Then you got Nichelle Nichols as Uhura, the communications officer.
They're very 70s fro.
Yes.
Yeah.
And apparently she wasn't happy with the uniforms. The drab.
I don't think any of them were.
Especially her.
It's a lot of moose knuckle in this movie.
Yeah.
She liked the miniskirt better.
Yeah. Then George Takei as Sulu. The best I can say about him in this movie is his facial expressions.
Yeah.
Pretty solid.
I don't know if you guys watch any deleted scenes, but there's a deleted scene with Sulu and Ilea. It's just funny because the whole thing about her race, and they don't get into it too much, is that she's supposed to have like this like complete sexual power over men. And part of the reason she shaves her head is to make her less attractive, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess part of the backstory was that no human male could have sex with a Deltan and live
and survive,
but Deckard did, and that's like their bond. But they don't talk about it in the movie so much. But there's a whole deleted scene where Sulu is showing her how to operate the board, and he's like dropping shit, and he's like fawning over her. And I thought one of the funniest lines in the whole movie was when she first boards the ship. Kirk isn't even being like usual Kirk, but she's like, do I need to remind you of my oath of celibacy? She's like, she knows. She's like, this guy fucks everything. I better tell him right off the bat. She doesn't just tell him that she has an oath. She says it's like registered with Starfleet.
It's on record, right?
It's on record.
Celibacy is on record, yeah.
I did like when she appears on the bridge and both Sulu and Chekhov are like just mowing her down with their eyes. And he's like, whoa, look at that.
And back to the novel, Gene goes into a lot of detail about.
I bet he does.
Really? Okay.
Oh, is it kind of gross, Keith?
Pervy. It's pervy.
Is it pervy?
I wonder who he modeled Ilea after.
All right, Lloyd, what's next?
So talking about Ilea, that was Perseus Kambata, the beautiful Perseus Kambata.
Yeah.
Okay, Lloyd.
She was really hot in Megaforce. Remember, John?
Yeah.
She gets it on with Barry Bostwick in that one.
The other great film she was in.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So she's known for Star Trek, and obviously she was in Megaforce, and then she died in the 90s, but she died very young.
98.
Yeah.
Age of 49.
Yeah, very sadly died. I was watching Nighthawks on Netflix, which I had never seen before, and Rucker Hauer's the bad guy in that. She plays his partner, so now I know she's in 3 movies now. At the very
together.
least. Yeah, they're together. Yeah, it's Sylvester Stallone and Billy D. Williams. They're cops. Yeah.
That's a deep dive.
It's not
she
great.
was in the Miss Universe pageant in 1965.
Wow.
That's before my time.
Yeah. Before what? The time you were 17?
Hey, stop. And finally, rounding off this cast, Stephen Collins as Willard Decker.
Yeah.
The former captain until he's displaced by Kirk. He played the Reverend Eric Hamden from Seventh Heaven.
Yep.
I never really watched that show, but I recognize him from there.
He was on the one season ABC show that I loved as a kid. Tales of the Golden Monkey. He played Indiana Jones Light. And it was a good show, but it didn't last. And he's had some issues. We'll leave it at that. Let's just say that Stephen Collins ended up with the kind of reputation that if he moves into a new neighborhood, Stephen Collins has to knock on your door.
Is he friends with Jeffrey Jones?
Yeah, he has to knock on your door. Keith, if you hear a knock at your door and you look through the peephole and it's Stephen Collins, don't answer it.
Yeah, he's another one of these like America's dads that fell from grace. One of these TV American dads that, you were shocked when you heard that. I was disappointed myself.
Yeah, super disappointed because he had this long career and he had that American good look. I could see why they picked him to be the new captain of the Enterprise.
All American look, blonde boy.
Yeah, and I think his performance in this film and the character arc of Decker is one of the highlights of the whole movie to me.
What's the connection to the original series?
The plot point never flashed out, but he's supposed to be the son of Commodore Decker from the Doomsday Machine episode.
Correct.
Oh,
played by William Wyndham.
Yeah,
in one of the best episodes of Star Trek.
Yeah,
that's the one with the giant cannoli in the sky. Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, the black cannoli. It was so good. Manja. So, first things first, if you're going to get into this movie, now Keith had asked me to tell you guys to watch a particular version of this movie, and I didn't do that on purpose, right? Keith, which one did you want us to watch?
Well, I recommended that if you could find it on DVD only, the director's edition.
Right.
Which in year 2000.
I have, and I watched. I don't think Lloyd saw it. John maybe did see that one.
I've seen the director's cut. I didn't watch it this time. It wasn't free on Amazon, and I didn't feel like paying an extra.
It's hard to find, and the reason it's not on Blu-ray is because they rendered all the effects, the new effects and things, in standard def only at the time.
Okay, I thought it would be interesting.
A big online thing going right now to try to get them to re-render everything out in 4K and get the thing out on 4K Blu-ray, which would be awesome.
It'll never happen.
It might.
I don't know. I doubt it.
What happens first, the Charlton movie or that?
Hurtful, Lloyd. That's very hurtful.
Come on.
It's mockery right there.
I love you guys. Come on.
Okay, hold on. Let me just update this. Lloyd 1. Keith 0. All right. No. Yeah, it's funny that you said that because I do own the motion picture DVD that Keith has. And I thought, well, why don't I just buy the Blu-ray anyways to have it in my collection? I went on Amazon and I noticed it was like $9.99. And I'm like, that seems like too little for this. And when I started reading it, the descriptions were like, this is not the director's cut. This is the original, because here's the crazy thing with this movie, and it happens in a lot of movies. There's the director's edition is 136 minutes. That's the one Keith has, the one I watched. The original version is 132 minutes. And crazy thing about this movie, rated G, right?
Yeah. Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
G-rated movie. The original, the version you saw, Lloyd. Yep. The version me and Keith saw was PG for Alien Terror or something like that. There's also a network TV edition, which of course they always did, that played on ABC on, the Sunday night movie. Yeah.
I'm sure that's how I saw it the first time.
143 minutes.
Whoa.
So like almost 8 minutes longer than the longer version of this thing.
Yeah,
so,
just a few extra reaction shots.
I watched a ton of the deleted scenes on Sunday. I went through a ton of the deleted scenes, and some of them are like, okay, why did you even include that? And some of them are pretty interesting, actually.
They actually have the 11 deleted scenes from the 1983 TV cut.
I watched a bunch, yeah. Yep. So, Keith, why don't you explain to everybody out there listening? I kind of mentioned it before, but like what this whole story is about.
Okay. Before we get into that, am I the only one here who's actually seen this film in a theater? Twice?
I have never seen it in the theater. I think it's the only one of the films the original films that I never saw in the theater.
I actually saw it in 1979. A friend of mine's birthday party was to go to this film. And then I saw it again this past year. Fathom Events put it out for the 40th anniversary.
Oh, I wanted to see that.
This is a movie that was designed for the big screen. And I think that's part of the problem when people watch it at home. It's especially the smaller the screen, the worse your experience is going to be with this film. This was designed, it was supposed to be epic. It was supposed to be sprawling. And Robert Wise kind of took the 2001 approach to it. And I think what people hate about it and call it Star Trek the motionless picture or Star Trek the slow motion picture is that the mindset I think here is it's been 10 years since anybody's seen Star Trek. And
10 years real time, 4 years story time is what I read. So 10 years in real time, but for our characters, they've been apart or 4 years since the Enterprise.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of these, the everything's deliberate. Every movement, the scenes are, everything's blocked deliberately. It's moved. It's paced to fill the screen, and it's supposed to bring this grandeur to something that was only on a small television set prior to this. So they're saying, here, we've got this real estate, we've got this, we're going to put out this epic version of a TV show now. Everything has to be bigger. And for me, the scene where Scotty brings Kirk to the Enterprise for the first time, and everybody makes fun of it. Oh, it's 20 minutes long. It's about 3, and it could be 10. I don't care.
Yep.
Because if you put yourself back in 1979 and you love Star Trek, you've never seen the Enterprise this close before. You've never seen this kind of detail on the Enterprise before. And this is a new refit Enterprise. So we're seeing it like it's never been shown before, and you're getting this tour, a guided tour around the ship. And contemporary audiences look at that now and they're like, Jesus, just get to the point. But that was the point. And the whole
I can see that 100%.
They did it again in Star Trek 2.
That way, and the whole movie is presented that way.
Yeah.
Deliberately. And that's why I think modern audiences that are used to these film directors who came up through MTV in the 90s, where everything's cut, cannot sit through a movie paced like this. And I think that's the problem with modern audiences going back and looking at this on home video.
Very insightful. Makes sense. Yep. I will say that years at the beginning of Pint of Comics, John and I did an episode. I'll have to find it and post it with this one, where we recorded it just about some random stuff. But the day we recorded, it was on TV and we watched almost the whole thing. And I remember and we did like a mini review of the movie. Just say we just watched motion picture. And I do remember John like lovingly, because he's a big Star Trek fan, pretty much saying that whole shuttle sequence was like Enterprise porn.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is. I love it.
It's and you mentioned Wrath of Khan. They do the space stock, leaving space stock. It's actually the stock footage from the first movie being recycled because their budget was so small for Wrath of Khan that they used they repurposed a lot of the stuff that Doug Trumbull did. It is porn. It's Enterprise porn, and I can't get enough of looking at that ship. The effects to this day from Star Trek: The Motion Picture hold up against anything else. And that was all done optically and with models, and it's phenomenal. And what I love about the director's edition is Darren Doctorman led the effects crew on this, and they really worked hard at matching the style, the look, and feel of what it would have been like if they had done these back in 1979. So it's not like the Star Wars special editions where you cut in the new stuff and it's glaringly obvious and wiggling. And this stuff seamlessly blends. You wouldn't know the difference.
Well, I can tell you for a fact. So I watched the same version you did, and I have seen that before. I own it, but I thought it was just remastered. I didn't realize that there was new effects added into it. So it was so seamless that I didn't know it watching it 3 days ago that like, oh, that wasn't in this originally.
Right.
So mission accomplished. You know what I mean? You fooled me. Where if I had watched a special edition for the first time ever, I would definitely be able to go, yeah, this does not, because a lot of it, that whole dance scene in Jabba's none of that would have fit in the same time period. But this one, I'm glad you said that because I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's seamless. They match the film grain and everything. Like you said, you wouldn't know. A casual viewer would not know which ones were 79 effects and which ones were 2001 effects.
Keith, what is the generalized plot of this film?
Well, the generalized plot we've talked about. This cloud comes into our sector of the neighborhood here, and it's just annihilating everything in its path for no apparent reason. And the reason is it's sending out a signal, but it's an old radio signal, and nobody really knows what that is. And the Klingons in the beginning are responding, and the space station, the Federation space station, is responding. Their hailing, their greeting is being reflected back because that thing doesn't know how to read the new subspace carrier waves or whatever they are. So it just blows stuff up. It interprets it as hostile action. So, of course, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise, which the goofy plot thread that they've used to death, is the only ship in the neighborhood that can go and save the universe.
I want to ask the Star Trek experts about this. So these ships don't have warp capabilities anymore? Like, they can't call, well, I know it's not around, but they can't call the Excelsior from the other end of the quadrant to come? Like, that part was, I wish they would have sat there for even 2 hours more and thought, like, well, it's approaching so fast that nobody could get here fast enough. And you're
send 5 or 6 other ships out there and they all get annihilated because they don't have Captain Kirk's and they don't have Spock's wherewithal to realize what was happening. So, they are on Earth, but that's the only ship they have protecting the whole planet. One that doesn't work properly. So, putting that aside and suspending our disbelief, off they go to try to intercept this thing before it attacks Earth. It's on a direct course for Earth. Now, we should back up a little bit. They've left Earth without Spock as first officer because he's on Vulcan trying to purge himself of all human emotion. He's trying to achieve what's called the Kolinar.
Yeah.
So,
Kolinar?
And while he's doing that, he telepathically picks up on this V'ger signal, this cloud's cry for help or whatever it is.
He's on Vulcan at their version of Burning Man. He's got a poncho on and he's like long haired and he's just about to pass the test that he's been, a purging. He's going to finally essentially become a full-blooded Vulcan. And no, he hears the cries of V'ger and says, I got to go. And he splits.
Right. He decides that he wants to investigate this. So he takes a shuttlecraft and catches up to the Enterprise, which is having all kinds of issues with their warp engines and whatnot.
Well, let's say, first of all,
they just happen to lose their science officer.
Yeah.
Well, they use Decker as this. Oh, yeah, right. In the transporter accident.
So I wrote down here some of the features of the brand new Enterprise. Shitty warp engines that cause wormholes. Seat clamps. So there's the arms of the seats clamp up over your legs so you don't fly out. And the universe's first ever transporter designed to fuck your ass up. I did write in a note, though, that the transporter malfunction scene for a G-rated movie is harrowing. Like that,
horrifying.
Screams
or
they didn't last long, Captain.
Yeah, whatever it was didn't live long. And that was supposed to be, so what we're talking about is Spock's replacement is another Vulcan, and Kirk has a brief scene with him earlier. They make it a point that you can't teleport or transport directly on to the Enterprise. There's a problem with the transporters, so they're transporting onto the space dock and then taking the shuttle over. They think they got it fixed. Two people, one of them being the science officer, try to transport in, and they lose them. Their molecules get all distorted, and it's just, they're screaming. It's a terrible. I can't believe it's a G-rated movie.
It's
in that one scene.
Yeah, I know.
It's so crazy.
Ever since I was a kid, that particular scene stuck with me. Like it really shook me because of those horrifying screams, and they're starting to form, and they're all turned like inside out.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh my god.
And as usual in Star Trek, people die and it's just shrug it off and move on. My favorite scene there is Commander Rand, if you remember Yeoman Rand from the original series, is there transporting them up, and Kirk takes over the board just to make sure he can get it done, and it doesn't happen, and he just basically taps her on the shoulder. Nothing you could have done, Rand.
Yeah. He taps her on the shoulder, tells her, you couldn't have done anything. And then he tells like one of his flunkies to contact the family.
Yeah.
And he's like, science officer, whatever his name was, family can be reached through the Vulcan consulate. I'm not doing that shit. I got a ship to run.
Commander Sonak, yeah.
Yeah.
Oops. So anyway, Spock catches up to them out in space en route to the cloud and offers his help as science officer. He's been monitoring their engine trouble. He quickly fixes their matter-antimatter mix ratio problem.
Right. Because they have a problem which sets them into like a wormhole, a warp wormhole. And I wrote a note here, only thing longer than the warp wormhole scene, cloud scene.
Cloud scene. They had to be close to 3 or 4 minutes.
The wormhole scene to me is another, it's indicative of the time again, of the 70s. It had the trippy, disco-y feel to it. They're
you lay that phaser order.
They got the trails coming off of them, and I just think it was one of those. Hey, look what we can do! Isn't this cool and trippy? And
yeah,
the scene is actually only about a minute and a half long. It just feels long.
Take into account that it's a theoretical scientific thing. So there's your science fiction to slap into an actual science fiction television show turned movie. So in retrospect, that scene is a lot more important than people realize. It's pretty cool how the whole thing comes about, and I like watching Kirk trying to get his team back together that he has just been reunited with, and failing until Decker actually steps in and says, "You can't do that."
Yep.
Right.
Well,
right. There's a lot of great moments in the film throughout the film where Kirk and Decker's strained relationship, the way they misinterpret one another sometimes, and Kirk's always about to reprimand him sometimes, and Decker's right, and he has to stop himself and go, okay, I stand
he does that a few times.
You brought up a good point there, John, about the science, and they had some actual consultants like Jesko von Puttkamer. Was an actual astronomer and scientist, and also oh my god, I just blanked.
Yngve J. Malmsteen?
No. Oh my god, I can't think. Just totally brain farted. But anyway, they had real science consultants on set, so that whole wormhole scene is an actual possibility of what could happen when you're trying to warp space.
Yeah, which when you look at it from that perspective, it makes the scene. There you go. It just makes it so much more interesting than what it may have initially turned out to be. But I like it anyway. It may seem like it's long, but it really isn't. It's just because of the way they draw it out in the slow motion effect as it continues to go on. So
the wormhole scene isn't that long. The cloud scene is kind of long, but I like it.
That goes to what Keith was saying about it being a huge spectacle on screen, because it really. I'm watching it on my computer screen last night and today, and I'm like, wow, this it really doesn't translate to smaller screens like this. And I can only wonder what it looked like then. It has a feel of 2001, A Space Odyssey, just to specify that movie.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not talking about the year. But it does. It has that big spectacle feel, and it's hard to gauge what it is you're looking at because the thing is supposed to be immensely big. They try and get that across through the dialogue. I don't know why people take such an offense to the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to where they say it's like 12 AUs in diameter or whatever it is, or 12th power, and then they have the tactical screen where they show the size of the cloud, and the Enterprise is tiny and it's going right into it, and they try to. And when you see it on the big screen, repeatedly, right? And when you see it on the big screen, the Enterprise is small, and you see this sprawling spaceship. When you can see all the detail on the metalworks and stuff on a smaller screen, a lot of that's lost in the Enterprise. You probably can't even see it there, so you don't even realize it's in the shot.
I see it like I was watching this little white dot move across the screen. I'm like, oh, there's the Enterprise. And I see these things coming out, and it looks like a cloud or some kind of weird cloud formation. It's really hard to see it, that it's supposed to be a structure.
Right.
And I have always felt that way about this thing because I've never seen it on the big screen. And even as a kid watching it on TV for the first time, like, what is this cloud thing? I don't understand.
Right.
It is, because it is a dialogue.
Clouds are boring.
Yeah. It's a dialogue driven piece, and you have to listen to what they're saying to understand. Because like I said, they repeat ad nauseum how many they're trying to express to you that this thing is huge and the Enterprise is tiny and it cannot compete power to power. There's a point where Kirk says to Sulu to downgrade the visual to 10 times smaller than normal, and he goes, "It's already 2 points smaller than that, sir."
Right.
Kirk's like, "Oh,
Right.
Okay."
Those are great moments in the film that I love. And keep in mind too, at the beginning, when you are seeing all this stuff with the Enterprise porn, they're also showing you a lot of scale, and they're putting into your brain, here's how big. They always have the little people outside working, and and then the shuttlecraft, and so you see how big the Enterprise is. Now the Enterprise goes into this thing, and it's this big on the
right.
So they you might not have noticed it, but your brain did.
All right, I got a 1 through 5 question for each of you. Lloyd posted one before about your Star Trek fandom. Here's one. On a scale of 1 to 5, Lloyd, how big of a dick is Kirk for just his ego and his complete audacity to come on board this ship in the manner he does it? I understand why they're putting him in, because his experience, but he doesn't do it very nicely with Deckard. What do you say, 1 through 5?
Well, his ego on a scale of 1 through 5 is a 15. So, and he has to show his leadership. He's not going to go in there and say, well, I kind of have to take over. So he did it the way that he has to do it. He's a 5 on that scale, but he had to do it that way.
Keith, what do you say?
Well, in the novelization, they have the previous scene where he's in the Admiral's office, which in the film is kind of brushed by. And they have the whole interaction with the Admiral. So you understand how hard Kirk pushes to get this back. As far as the way he treated Decker, I'm kind of with Lloyd. I mean, I think Picard might have handled it like the same way. He just would have been like, this is the way it is, tough.
Yeah.
We have to get moving here.
All right.
And and I have the most experience, and just got to sit aside for this one.
So that's a 20 from Keith. John, what do you got?
Well, I'm with those guys. I mean, Kirk is a total, I don't want to call him an egomaniac, because he really isn't. He does have he has a big personality, and he's meant to be in the captain's chair. Yeah, there's a little bit of tact that's missing, and I think a lot of that has to do with the script. There's pieces that were missing in the nuance. I did like where Deckard pushes back at him. He's like, you haven't logged any star hours. You don't know any of the new ratings of the ship. He goes, well, that's why you're staying.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Essentially, it's like, that's why we didn't totally fire you.
Right.
We kept you on, and we're still going to pay you a captain's rate. But yeah. and then what I love about that is, I just want to say real quick, I love how he's obviously pissed that Kirk takes a seat, But when Spock comes, he's like, you can have it.
Yeah.
He's like cool about it because it's like Spock's not a dick. Spock just came back, was very polite. And I'm like, no, you know what? I'm all right. I'm going to go hit on Ilea.
It's interesting to see how they handle the dual admiral, now captain now XO. It's just a weird setting. It's just that, to me anyway, I don't know about you guys, did it feel like, regardless of where this movie was going to go and regardless of what you know as a fan, did it feel like it was temporary to you? Because it doesn't feel like this is a permanent position for Kirk, even though he wants it to be.
Yeah.
It is temporary too, because the thing that I think a lot of people forget, or maybe like more lay fans, like obviously, like I said, I'm not at your level, is that Kirk isn't the captain in part 2 either.
No.
Spock is. And he's just happens to be on the ship when Khan, comes back. I think Kirk's intentions, I think the admirals or whoever, the vice admiral's intentions were for this to be temporary. I think Kirk's intentions initially were temporary, but I think that he wanted it. Even if it was super subconscious, he wanted it.
Right.
I think
I agree.
The underpinnings of this film, and then the Wrath of Khan takes it up another notch, is Kirk dealing with middle age and going through a bit of a midlife crisis and trying to figure out where he belongs now. And he's very vulnerable in Wrath of Khan. He's tired and worn out, and he doesn't know, really if he belongs out there anymore. Despite what he wants, can he physically do it anymore? And it's those kind of vulnerabilities and that stuff that happens under the hood in Star Trek that's always appealed to me, because those are real people, and that's what's lacking in a lot of other science fiction to me.
We end up with this kind of not a love triangle, but you've got Decker and Ilea. They had this history, apparently. So V'ger sends in a lightning bolt probe, right? And it essentially, how do they put it? I have it here. It reduces Ilea to data patterns, right? It kills you, essentially, but it kind of absorbs your
body
and your mind, and then sends like a probe back onto the Enterprise in Ilea's visage, right?
To steal from another science fiction television series, Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future, it digitized her.
Yeah, it essentially digitized her. So, I have a question about this, right? And I know that we can get into this all day long. Is V'ger the origin of the Borg, or is that just me looking too far into things?
No, well, they've written the novels about maybe V'ger landing on the Borg planet, or who knows? Who knows? There's another novel too where the Doomsday Machine was created to fight the Borg, and that
okay,
its programming got all messed up. So, because people who made the Doomsday Machine make V'ger.
Spock has a very interesting line of dialogue talking about V'ger towards the end, where he says, "Any show of resistance would be futile."
Yeah,
I thought, well, Jesus, like, was that not an Easter egg, obviously, then, but was that line an Easter egg in the Next Generation?
V'ger, Star Trek's always played around with machine intelligence on some level, so going back to the 60s, so it could just be sheer coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the way that they handle things in any of the series from this point, it's just, because V'ger has never been revisited, it's up to interpretation how you want to deal with it. And I personally dislike the way that connections are made throughout the Star Trek universe. A lot of writers in their novels, Peter David, like to do that kind of stuff, but it really kind of sucks. Peter David.
I'll be honest, for this story as a standalone story, I don't want V'ger to be the beginning of the Borg.
It shouldn't be, really, but
but just kind of like how it operates. Ilea becomes a suit, and they get her out of the Starfleet uniform, and they Winnie the Pooh her, right? They give her like a long top and essentially, like a robe, like straight up. Like, is she wearing underwear? I don't know.
Would you like her porn shoes?
She has porn shoes on, absolutely. And the connection between her and Deckard starts to kind of increase. Like, he's suddenly like, I'm kind of grooving on this fucking cold man-made machine thing.
Spock. She doesn't want the Decker unit. She just wants Decker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Forget his unit.
So they get through the cloud, right? We have this very long sequence where they eventually get through the giant starfish vagina, whatever it is that's opening up. That's the center.
It's the sucking sphincter, is what. Yeah, sure.
the giant cosmic butthole that is V'ger.
Spock even calls it the V'ger orifice.
Ooh, yeah, I don't know if I noticed that.
He was timing the contractions,
right?
So he could zip through it on his little chair.
Yeah. So here's a question about Spock. So Spock steals a jetpack, right? Essentially, they call it something else, a flight unit, to go out of the Enterprise and to go, shooting through the cosmic butthole, right? He sets this thing, he launches into it, and then he ditches the
rocket pack.
The rocket pack. Is Spock expecting to die inside V'ger, or what was going on there?
What do you think, Keith? Because
I was wondering that myself.
I have my own theory on that.
It seems like a suicide mission without the jetpack.
And he's recording the recording as if, when you find this, I'll be dead.
Right.
That could be. I also maybe just the fuel was exhausted because he had to charge the chair and time it to get through there, and the thing might have been exhausted at that point. He might have known he didn't have any fuel to get back anyway. So
one-way trip, Jim.
Yeah.
I
Keith, how many
believe.
times have you watched this movie?
40, 50 times probably.
Wow. It's impressive.
I believe that Spock was going through on a one-way trip to find what drew him away from Kolinar, which would have been merging with V'ger to become whatever the hell he was supposed to become that he missed out on. Because you have to look at it from Spock's perspective. He's the man in between. He's two different races, never fitting in one, never fitting in the other. He's always looking for a place to be. His only home has ever been on the Enterprise, and every time he tries to move on, he's always drawn back to the Enterprise.
And in the following scenes where what he learned from his mind meld with V'ger showed him how valuable feelings are.
Right.
And when he grabs Kirk's hand, he says, "This simple feeling is beyond V'ger's comprehension," and he weeps for V'ger.
That scene straddles really good and really corny in a way to me.
Yeah, real cheesy.
A little cheesy because it's
welcome to Star Trek.
They turn Spock around in the chair and he's got the single tear like that Indian in the 70s when people were littering. He's got that one.
The sign of the era.
Yeah. We end up on V'ger. Lloyd, what the fuck is V'ger? What do we discover V'ger is?
Well, V'ger is a former, probe that was sent out. The Voyager, it's called.
Voyager series probes.
Yeah.
Which were sent out in they said 300 years ago from their time.
Yeah. So
sent out
like
20th century Earth space probe. Believe that was lost in a black hole.
Right.
So it gets lost in a black hole.
So we went from the 23rd to the 20th century.
Something ends up finding it and essentially creating a system around it, the cloud.
Right.
And because it's waiting to transmit its data, right? This thing it's filled up its memory banks with what its job was to do. The next thing that it has to do is it has to give that data to something. So it's now been searching.
Right. Return the information it finds to its creator.
Right.
I believe is the mission.
Which I love that scene where Deckard calls out NASA like it's not a thing anymore because it's not to them. Yeah. So they determine that they're going to trigger V'ger so that it can unload its load of data. Sorry, I didn't mean that sound gross. Unload its data back onto Earth, and they find out that it's kind of self-sabotaged itself. It burned out one of its RCA cables on purpose so that it just can't.
Old technology.
And so, John, what happens here? Why does Deckard do what he does?
Who the fuck knows?
You mean merge with V'ger?
Truly, I
honestly,
part of the movie I don't get.
Well, this is part of the movie that really kind of falls apart on me is the whole Decker Ilya thing where she's not really Ilya. She's a machine pro based on her memory engrams, basically. And he's so fully engorged on her that he's got to have her regardless of what happens. Now, and as to what happens to them afterwards, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
It seems like he was a captain, but then he's displaced by Kirk, and then he's displaced by Spock, and he's not really. Maybe he feels he's not respected as much as he should.
And this is a contract for the next 3 movies.
Yeah, right. He doesn't have a contract, and he's really boning hard on Ilya. And this is a time to really become one and become something new and maybe something great. Something epic.
Something tickled his prostate enough just to get in on that machine. So,
and he's like, "Fuck it, I'm going in."
Here's something that I thought when I watched it. One line of dialogue that could have made that part make a little more sense to me, because up until this point, like, yes, he gets displaced as captain. That sucks, but you know what? You're Deckard. You're going to get a ship eventually. It doesn't have to be the Enterprise. We've already kind of established the Enterprise is kind of a piece of shit. Even after this refit, it's got murder transporters and the warp doesn't work right. And you literally need a guy who doesn't work for Starfleet anymore and Spock to fix it, right? It doesn't seem like his life is that bad. What I thought was, and again, I know it'd be tough because in their future, none of this exists, but if there was like a moment where, I don't know, Chapel tells him that he's got some kind of like disease or something that he cannot live through privately, says, your tests came back, Will, and, you've got a year left. Because it just seems like being in love with her and losing his job at the same time really wasn't enough to fucking like merge beings with her and become like a space phantom. Keith, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think? Was it the case of that, like, maybe this Deltan Poontang was so good that he's so scrambled over it that he's like, fuck it, I'll do anything to be with her again.
Like, I've had some of that Deltan Poontang. It's worth it.
Man, we are in 1979.
Well, Star Trek, classic Star Trek anyway, is about exploration and the idea of advancing human race and basically learning more and evolving. And he saw this as a chance to evolve into or mutate, to use an X-Men parlance, into the next evolution of human beings. So he took it because at the core in the Star Trek future, there's no need for money. There's no need for personal gain. Those kind of things are supposed to be gone. And this was an opportunity to go literally go where no man's gone before. And I think he took it because he took himself to another level of consciousness with this. Would I do it? No, but it's Star Trek. So somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
All right.
And, just want to back up a minute too with the Voyager thing. I took my buddy Paul to the Fathom event thing. He had never seen this movie. And he sucked air when Kirk wiped off the burn marks and says Voyager 6 on it. He went, oh my God, it's one of our probes. Like that very Twilight Zone. I love that
That's
twist.
Cool.
And that it's a great twist, and it's a great payoff for sitting through, as people call it, the cloud voyage.
I was going to actually, I know you were a kid when you saw it in 79, but like very much like the end of Planet of the Apes with the Statue of Liberty, I can imagine that in 79 when it's much less dramatic. It's not Charlton Heston, damn it. But with Kirk wiping that away and then realizing, holy shit, this is a man-made machine. This is ours. Right. And, I could see that being a big twist. I could see that being an M. Night Shyamalan moment, Yeah.
And it worked 5 months ago on my 62-year-old buddy who'd never seen it before. He literally went, oh my God,
That's cool.
Yeah.
So at the end of this movie, Deckard and Ilya have become, space V'ger. They're V'ger now, whatever. V'ger decides to spare the Earth because it was able to transmit its data. And Kirk gets what he wants, the Enterprise. And you have this very cool moment where he goes back on the ship, and what's the order he gives? Just like, let's go, whatever. I got to say that this movie, I think, even from myself, because I've seen this movie several times, And even when I think back on it, I like it, but there's always that stigma of it being boring or it being the motionless picture. I'm glad we did this because I appreciate this movie more now than I ever have. I can't go as far as Keith and say that it's number 2 in my Star Trek movies list. And I'm really hoping that Star Trek 2 is number 1. Is Star Trek 2 number 1?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I thought he was going to say 5, and then we're going to have to kick him off the show. But I don't know. I feel like I have a new appreciation for this movie. I wanted to bring up one more note that I had missed on earlier. It has one of my favorite Star Trek scenes of all time in this movie. I think it's when they're going through the cloud or through the wormhole. When the Enterprise's display isn't working, Spock does a Polish hammer to the fucking, he double axe handles the thing, and it just smashes like a ColecoVision.
They're being probed, and he realizes that it's going through their technical manuals, and it's learning about the ship.
Right.
How the ship works, so he smashes the computer,
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. The way he does it,
I do have to say, during that whole scene, though, when it zaps Decker a couple of times, and then it just like zones in on Ilea and picks her out of the entire bridge crew to digitize.
So what you're saying is Ilea should have been wearing a red shirt.
Well, I mean, there were no red. Were there red shirts? I mean, you do see the red shirts eventually, but they're in engineering only, and very few scenes. But overall, it's like, why is she picked? Why not Spock? You know, it's just it's kind of a silly ongoing Star Trek thing where it's, oh look, it's was Lieutenant Hawk.
Yeah, Lieutenant Hawk.
Who? What?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I wonder if maybe her Delta Deltan pheromones actually worked on V'ger. Maybe V'ger was like, V'ger's like, damn, Deltan Poontang.
I don't know. It's just kind of funny, the whole thing. But
damn girl, what you doing on this ship?
I still enjoy the scene. It's slightly reminiscent of the Changeling episode of the original series where Kirk has to slap down the V'ger probe of Ilea when it's trying to destroy the Earth, and he's like, we know why you can't transmit the information, but I'm not going to tell you why.
Right.
Yeah.
You must remove all the devices, and then I'll tell you why.
Yeah. But you must, holding back the information. Oh God, the dialogue back and forth between them is great. And as he's like getting everybody off the bridge, he's like, nah, we're leaving. See you later, pro.
And then Peter turns the tables on him and flips it. And McCoy says, wow, it learns fast, doesn't it?
I'm gonna have to go check that one out.
I actually laughed. I've seen the movie a number of times, and I watched that thing again. I'm like, oh, that's great. It was so quick and so easy, and I'm thinking the same thing as McCoy. It's damn smart, ain't it?
Now,
just having a tantrum, Mr.
Yeah. It's these scenes still hold up after all this time. People that put this movie down, I really think that they're watching a different film.
I think out of all the Star Trek movies, this is the one that is the closest to the original series. This is the one that feels the most Star Trek out of all of them. Plot-wise, the characterization, the dialogue, the whole thing. It feels more like the original series than any of the other ones.
And it's the one closest to the original series in terms of time. Right. So
time-wise,
they evolved. I think Wrath of Khan became Wrath of Khan because even though this movie made money, so many people, gave it that stigma. Oh, it's so fucking boring. Well,
there aren't any real, tentpole type action scenes in this thing.
Right.
Not at all.
Blowing up the asteroid in the wormhole is about as exciting as it gets.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, a couple quick trivia things. You guys know these, but maybe the listeners don't. The Klingon commander at the beginning is Mark Leonard. Yeah, who played Spock's father, Sarek, on the show and in the movies. And the commander of the Epsilon 9 space station is the actor who was going to play Zahn on Star Trek Phase 2. So that's pretty cool. They had to let him go from the show, but they gave him a minor role in this.
Very minor.
Very minor, very minor. I like the fact that in the opening credits, two things about the opening credits. Persis Kambata's name comes up. It's called Presenting Persis Kambata, which you don't get very often. And I wanted to ask, like Lloyd and John, because I don't know if this is a director's cut thing. Did it begin, like, this is very weird, especially for a movie in the 70s, an overture. This has an overture at the beginning, which is very
the last films to feature one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it was the last film till Hateful Eight, actually.
Yeah, you had that like 3-minute, I think it's what, Ilea's theme or something. And that's the next thing I want to talk about real quick is the score, Jerry Goldsmith's score. This is an amazing, amazing score.
It's really great.
So amazing that they used it for Next Generation as the main theme for that. Little things in this score that I loved. There's a few moments where you get the classic Alexander Courage theme, kind of like in this little moment here and there. And I don't know what to describe it as, but when the cloud, that like heavy metal noise, that like it sounds like metal bending and like bow wow wow.
I heard it's an old bass, and I forgot the model of it. There's a podcast that I love called Inglorious Trexperts, and the hosts actually work on Star Trek.
Okay.
Last year they did several episodes about Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and they talk about the score specifically for a whole hour, and they talk about that instrument. They just do a fret run on it, and you know.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Jerry Goldsmith in 1979 also did the score for Alien. So he had a pretty badass year. The main theme is incredible. The Ilea's theme, all of that. It's such a good score. And
he had to score a lot of that with no visuals because the effects weren't done.
Yeah.
Because they had to, play catch up on that. So he was basically scoring the cloud voyages. A lot of that he didn't have. So he had to just kind of make something up, and it all came together perfectly.
I read this online, and I'm going to throw it out there. It might not be a fact, and I usually like to research this stuff more, but I was reading an article about the making of this movie, so I'm kind of going to lean towards that it might have been fact, that the score to this movie was orchestrated and recorded on December 1st, 1979, and the movie opened on the 7th. So they recorded it in one day, 6 days before the premiere of the movie, and jammed it in there. Now, if you're listening to this and you know more than I do, and that's totally wrong, I apologize. But I read it, and then I read it somewhere else on a second article that it didn't say December 1st. It said like 1 week prior to release. And I've heard of movies. Look, if you've ever seen, I know it's not a movie, but if you've ever seen that South Park documentary where they show how they get it to Comedy Central sometimes 3 hours before it airs. I understand that shit can happen. But to think a major motion picture not scored for 6 days and then it comes out with the score. That's crazy.
There were reports that the night it opened that they would start running the movie and the other reels weren't delivered yet. Like the last two reels were on their way. God. And also that the premiere in Washington, D.C., some of the film reels were still wet.
Yeah.
And they
were, Robert Wise.
Literally last minute.
Yeah. The reason there is a director's cut is because Robert Wise never saw the theatrical release as his final vision of the movie. Because it wasn't completed to his expectations, really. He just didn't have time.
Calling it a rough cut for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So what was extra about that cut?
I don't know.
This one here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they changed some of the dialogue scenes. They retimed some of the scenes, altered the way some of it was edited. And then they enhanced some of the visual effects, especially in those scenes where they're going through the cloud. The cloud is just supposed to be what surrounds the V'ger spaceship. It's this enormous spaceship with all these different chambers in it.
Right.
So Darren and his team actually built from the storyboards what it really looked like. And when it comes out over Earth at the end and it drops all those devices around Earth, you actually see the whole spaceship without the cloud. And it looks great. It's really cool looking.
That's cool.
You know what Robert Wise originally said about doing the movie too, and I read this in a book, and I forget if it was Robert Justman's book about the original series. It may have either been in that or one of the books about Star Trek on the whole, where he, after being hired to do the movie, he wanted to recast all the parts because he didn't want to work with those television people. They're not film actors, and he was really upset about having to work with this these television people. They didn't know how to block themselves on a film set. You know, they were always compacted together because they're used to being on a TV set. They'd never done. I mean, other than individually, they'd never really done a full feature film together. So he was not pleased with them at all.
I had read there was some controversy too, where, and I didn't write the gentleman's name down, but the guy who was hired to direct a lot of Phase 2, they told Roddenberry or whoever told him that he was going to be the director of the motion picture. But then when it came time to make the motion picture and it became like more real, I guess the execs at Paramount were like, they don't want a TV director. So that's why they went out and got Robert Wise, because they wanted someone that could handle a giant production. So this guy, you know, was pissed off because he, you know, I guess he was with Phase 2 for quite a while. His name was Robert something else. I don't remember. I'm sorry, I didn't write that down. But yeah, so he was pretty pissed off because that was going to be his thing. And they kind of said, yeah, you'll do it. And then the brass said, yeah, we're not hiring that dude. We're going to hire like a real movie director that made the Hindenburg and Sound of Music.
Yeah, I vaguely remember reading that too. You know, there's so much Star Trek lore, if you want to call it that I've forgotten. I don't know. You get immersed in it because there's so many experts out there that know everything.
Right.
There's a great 2-book series called The 50-Year Mission by Mark Altman.
Yeah.
And it's not written as from, you know, his theories on Star Trek. It's all actual quotes and memos from all the people involved, all from the beginning till now. It's really
so like when Shatner was domineering the telephone at the original studio and got everybody all upset because he was always on the phone. So then Leonard Nimoy had to get a phone. And then when Leonard Nimoy had a phone, then they needed another. It was
D. Kelly, right.
Well, Shatner's the one that would like demand to see the scripts, and if like Leonard Nimoy had more lines, he would demand they'd cut them. Right? Wasn't that one of the things?
It kind of went back and forth between the two of them.
Yeah,
really.
Between the two of them, it was. There's a great episode of Inglorious Treksperts where they found an old memo and they read it. And Darren Doctorman does a perfect spot-on Gene Roddenberry impression. So you read it as Gene. And it's to Leonard Nimoy, William Shatner, and DeForest Kelly about their abominable behavior, and he's about to pull the plug on the whole show.
Wow!
In season 2, it's great. You know, in this film, keep in mind, because we're inundated with these kind of things now, but this is the first time they took a television property and turned it into a feature film.
That was something
a huge gamble.
This was the first,
the very first. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Wow. Yeah.
So you think about that. I mean, they put a lot of money and a lot of they gambled, because if this didn't work,
and when you look at the immediate returns, if you look at the weekly receipts, it did huge amounts of money. It just, they had spent so much trying to develop this thing and so much on advertising and promoting it. They just didn't see as big of a profit than they were hoping for.
It's also the first crossover Happy Meal promotion of all time with me.
That I did read. This is the first.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
If you got the boys' Happy Meal, you got a little round James Doohan eating a Big Mac with Grimace. And if you got the girls, you got Ilea, and you could lift her skirt up and see that she's bald on the bottom. Yeah, it's gross. It's really gross. All right. So
she's really a fry guy.
He's a fry guy. Yeah. The Hamburglar bends her over, and after he does it to her, he fucking implodes because even Hamburglars can't fuck Deltans.
What about Grimace?
Grimace can handle anything. All right. So let's get into the part. Lloyd, now I know that we don't have box office for the weekend because it's 1979.
We do have some stuff.
Okay, give us some box office for that time of year or the year.
I have the opening weekend for Star Trek.
Okay.
11.9 million.
Which back in 79 was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have the year. So starting at number 10, Meatballs, 43 million. Number 9, Moonraker.
Oh.
Yeah, 70. Number 8, one of my favorites, The Jerk.
Yeah.
73. Number 7, the movie 10 with Bo Derek. 74.
Titties.
Oh, yeah, cornrows.
Yeah.
Number 6, Apocalypse Now.
The horror.
Number 5, Alien.
Fuck yeah.
Yep, 78.9. Number 4, Star Trek, 82. That's domestic. Worldwide, it was 139 million. And then number 3, Rocky 3, 85 million.
Wait, it's got to be Rocky 2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have my glasses on. Rocky 2.
Draw your head,
number
Lloyd.
2, The Amityville Horror, 86 million.
Wait, 79? Wait, don't say it. 79, number 1. Okay, I think
Little Whorehouse in Texas out yet?
No, I know what it is. Because me and John fought over this one time.
In the Bandit?
Kramer versus Kramer.
That was 80s, I think.
I saw that on another list, but on this particular one, it's Superman.
Oh, well, that was 78.
Yeah, but back then movies would play for an entire
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the Muppet movie didn't make it in the 79 list? That's crazy. I would have thought that made it.
I got 1 through 10.
Okay, yeah. No, I would have thought the Muppet movie would have been up there. That's too bad.
Yeah.
That holds up.
Movie.
I watched it. First thing I watched when I got Disney Plus. I didn't even watch The Mandalorian. I was like, Muppet movie.
I watched all the Muppet stuff.
Yeah.
I watched it too.
Yeah.
The Rainbow Connection.
All right. So we're at the point now where we go through 0 through 5, quarter scales available. What do you rate on that scale? 1979 Star Trek TMP, the motion picture. We'll start with Sir John. John, what do you give it?
3.5 bald Ilias.
All right. 3.5. I'll go next. I give this. I agree with John. I rated this on Letterboxd a 3.5, 3.5 for me, and I think this last viewing raised it up at least either a half or 3/4 of a point from where I was at before. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this more than I had. I will admit, this movie does. There's a few times where I found myself like maybe drifting a little bit, but it still holds my attention. It's just like the cloud scene is long. I will give it that. The cloud scene's a little long, but I understand what you said about the scope of it.
You know what the movie feels like to me? It's like I'm Dr. McCoy. Every time something important happens on the bridge, he just shows up. That's what the movie feels like to me. It's like, oh, I gotta see that. I gotta see that. I gotta see that. All right, I'm done here. Okay, I'll see you later.
Well, it's like in the next generation.
He just keeps showing up for no good reason.
It's like in the Next Generation movies, right? In the Next Generation movies, Worf is not part of the crew anymore, but and he's on Deep Space Nine.
Oh yeah.
But they keep on it's like the adventure begins and it's like Worf's here to borrow a cup of butter, and then the Borg attack, so he's on the ship, and then the next one, someone's getting married, so Worf's there, and then the Romulans attack, so he's on the ship. It's like every time they have to shoehorn him in somehow. All right, Lloyd, what do you give it?
I'd say 20, 30 years ago when I saw it the first time, it was lower. And every subsequent viewing, it goes up higher and higher. And I think for the first time ever, all three of us at Pint Comics gave it a 3.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So before you give your rating, Keith.
Yeah.
Redeem yourself. Talk a little bit about the Charlton movie.
Oh.
Talk a little bit about your new podcast. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay.
And find the new podcast, which I vouch for. I don't just say this because you're my friend. I'm immediately into it. I love the format, and I like the fact that it's just it's very conversational and very laid back, which I like a lot. So you continue on that.
Okay.
Hype yourself up.
The Charlton movie, you can see the camera behind me.
Yep.
I've been doing some tabletop stuff of old Charlton comics for B-roll since I'm stuck here. We're at the post-production phase for the most part, and Jackie and I actually picked up a new intern 2 days before the lockdown, so I think she's gone now. So we'll have to find another one. This girl was great too. I've been doing some of the offline editing here while I'm home. It's a lot. We have about 70 hours of interview footage, and there's a couple more we still want to get. And we also wrote a comprehensive story outline. We broke the narrative down. So we know exactly what we want, what we need, where to go. Unfortunately, the big obstacle is we're going to need some money because we need animators and editors and things like that. So
now the important thing,
it's going to be a rough year for financing. So we're going to be kicked back another year.
Give the audience real quick, though, what the Charlton Movie is all about.
The Charlton Movie is a documentary about a now defunct comic book company called Charlton Comics. They were here in Derby, Connecticut, and they launched the careers of dozens of what we would call, I guess, Hall of Fame comic book talent, writers, artists, and you name it. So it's a really interesting story because the company was founded by two guys who were in prison at the time, who both had a son named Charles, and they got the idea to go into publishing when they got out of jail. And hilarity ensues from there.
Well said.
Very well said. Very well said.
Thank you.
The podcast.
Somehow I ended up running this stupid thing. I was an accessory to it at the beginning, but now I'm in charge. My buddy Angelo owns a pizza place in Wallingford named Eastside Pizza. And every time you go in there, a conversation springs up that sounds like an episode of your podcast. And customers get involved and the staff gets involved and it becomes the cheers of pizza. My ex-girlfriend used to call it the cheer. Let's go to cheers of pizza. Because you get in, you end up stuck there for 4 hours because you get in these great conversations about movies and TV and comics. And so we were hanging out there one day and going off on something. And Angelo said, man, we should do a podcast. This would be great. So what we attempted to do, and we only had one shot at it, was to record in the restaurant while they're open and get all that to take place. Didn't quite get the energy the first time, and then COVID happened. So now we're doing Zoom podcasts, but we're going to stick it out because we need to keep, we have to keep putting content up or nobody will care anymore. So hopefully when we go back, we can find our footing a little bit more and go with it. But thank you for the compliments. I appreciate it.
Well, seriously, like the Zoom thing is disruptive to the whole thing. Like I find myself talking over you guys more than I normally would. I feel like the rhythm is different in here and I can't read everything all the time here. But that being said, having heard your show, you guys do a great job of, getting your points across. And I like the format where it's like 3 subjects, 20 minutes, a subject, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. And the other thing I like about it is that you guys like rotate people in and out. So like you're pretty constant, which is good. But then you'll get like these 2 guys on this segment. And then the next segment, those 2 guys are gone and 2 other guys. You got a fucking roster of people on that thing.
Yeah. Alan Spalding and I have done 3 or 4 podcasts in the past for production. So we kind of just took the format we did there, which was segments, and just kind of brought it to this and said we should, instead of doing one whole show about one thing, let's just do a quick hits on several things and keep it moving. And what we want to do when we get back into the restaurant is actually do it like a hockey game where we change on the fly. Be like, hey, get over here, take my seat, and get up and go, and kind of keep it really loose like
tag
that.
Team.
Yeah. So
all right. So where can everybody find you, Keith, on social media?
Me personally?
You, the podcast, whatever you want to throw out there.
We'll just go with the podcast for now. Just Pizza Pop Culture on Twitter, Facebook. Just actually Pizza Pop Culture, all one word.com, and then you can go from there.
All right. Now, the final and most important question of the night, Keith. What do you rate Star Trek: The Motion Picture on a scale of 0 to 5? I doubt it'll be a 0, but
no. And I never give 5s. We follow each other on Letterboxd, and I never give anything a 5.
Yeah, I'm rare with the 5.
Nothing is perfect. Everything has flaws. So 4 is always my highest. So that said, I will give Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and this is a unified 3.5.
Wow.
Amazing.
This is let's just quit now. Pint of Comics, last episode. Thank you.
The pinnacle.
Thank you all for listening for the last 3+ years. Keith, thank you for being our final guest.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I finally got on. When we're all back to normal, I got to come hang out with you guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I haven't seen you guys in like a year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As soon as COVID's done, you're over, and we're doing this live. But for now, since this is the last episode of Pint of Comics, we all hit 3.5.
No, you can't do that to me. I told you I check 2 or 3 times a week for something new, and I always look at you. I'm like, oh, come on, John.
Lloyd, Sir John, why don't you harmonize and get us out of this episode of Pint of Comics?
Okay, I'll be Kirk.
All right.
Oh, now? Okay.
Now.
Now.
No. See ya.
You actually got it, too.
Good.
It's over, Johnny. It's over! Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off!